So welcome to Webinar Wednesday, right? It's the middle of the week. We're all a little wiped out. So I'm going to keep this webinar fairly short so that I can give you a good introduction to emotional freedom technique, but also not overload you, because we live in an amazingly stressful world. And so anything that I can bring to you that can help kind of bring that stress down, I'm all for it. So hopefully tonight you're going to learn a little bit more about emotional freedom technique that maybe you didn't know. Maybe some of you are brand new to emotional freedom technique, but I think that you're going to find this fairly informative. And I wanted to do a little housekeeping before we got started. So I had said earlier about if you haven't done so, go ahead and download those tapping guidelines that came in your email. Also, I'm going to be sending the replay tomorrow, so you'll have that as well. So if there's anything that you feel like you've missed, that I went too fast, you can then definitely take a look at the replay and check that out. Also, this webinar is going to be about just around 25 minutes or so, and I'm going to leave some time at the end for Q&A. So if you hover at either the bottom or the top of your screen, you'll see that there's a little piece where you can put in a Q&A question. So if any time during this presentation you have a question, go ahead and pop that in the Q&A, and then when I'm done, I'll go ahead and address it, okay? So what I wanted to talk about first, before I even dove into emotional freedom technique, was the whole mind-body connection, and I wanted to discuss feelings. So take a look at this graphic here for a second, because I really want you to focus on this graphic to really understand why and how emotional freedom technique works. And so we first want to look at like cognitive behavior theory, which is you have a situation, you then have a thought around that situation, then that thought creates a feeling in your body, and from there you'll take an action, right? So let's look at an example. For example, you're asked to make a presentation. You have a thought around it. Let's say you love doing presentations. So you say, well, I love to do presentations. The feeling that you have is you have this feeling of joy. You're happy. You're delighted to do it. The action that you then take is you go do the presentation, and you do it happily. Your body and your mind were focused. They were single-minded, and you moved forward with an action. You did the presentation, and it went great. Now let's take a situation, another situation, a little bit different, but this time you're asked to make a presentation and you hate making presentations. You hate everything about it. It makes you nervous. It makes you scared. You have the thought, I hate making presentations. I'm not going to do a presentation. And then you have these feelings in your body that kind of align with that. You get scared, your mouth maybe gets dry, your hands get a little shaky, your body equals what's happening in your thoughts. And then the action that you take is that you decide not to do it, or better yet, you get someone else to do it. Now here again, you're also single-minded, right? Because you still did what you didn't want to do, if that makes sense. You were single-minded in your pursuit to not do the presentation. And so what I want you to see here is that thoughts reside in the mind, and they're in the conscious. And feelings reside in the body. They're in your subconscious. It's almost like breathing, right? You never think about breathing. But what I want you to know is that feelings always override the mind. The body will always override the mind every single time. So that's why it's so hard to change. So you do your positive affirmations, and yet nothing is shifting, because when you're doing your positive affirmations, there's a little voice in the back of your mind saying, there's no way this is going to work. This is not going to work. Those are those feelings that tend to override any good personal development work that we do. And that's where emotional freedom technique really focuses on. It focuses on those feelings in the body. So let's say you do a little bit of personal development work. And again, it's the same situation. Someone says to you, they call you up on the phone and they say, let's do a presentation. I'd like you to come and speak to our group, right? So you're saying to yourself, I want to. I've really been doing a lot of work. I really want to do this, right? But then in your body still has those same feelings. You get a little shaky. You get a little scared. You get a little nervous. It starts to override it. And if we go back to that other slide, what happens is We take no action. We don't do anything, or we wait until the last minute. When it comes to a presentation, maybe we wait until the last minute before we even do that, before we even prepare for it. And what happens is the presentation is not a total disaster, but also it's not perfect either. And it wasn't really what you wanted to do. So what do we do? How do we get these feelings out of the body? That's where emotional freedom technique comes in. Emotional freedom technique is something that I learned about maybe, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. I don't know how long it's been. It's when Nick Ortner first came out with the tapping solution with the movie. And I looked at it and I thought, this has got to be about the weirdest thing I've ever seen, this tapping on different points on the body. I didn't really understand it. But what I did notice is that people like Louise Hay, Cheryl Richardson, Wayne Dyer were all behind it. And I thought, well, if they're doing it and they're behind it, it's, you know, good enough for me. I should at least try it. So I started playing around with it. I mean, it's a fairly simple technique to learn. I started playing around with it and I found that it really was helpful, and it really did help me with a lot of my stress, a lot of my overwhelm, and a lot of my anxiety. So I thought, well, you know, I'm going to go ahead and get trained in this because I think it's something worthwhile to bring to my clients in my coaching practice. And it wasn't until I went into training that I realized that there was so much more to emotional freedom technique than meets the eye, and that there is a real methodology to how to do this and how to do it correctly in order to have a really good, effective result. So to go back a little bit with emotional freedom technique, you know, a lot of people call it EFT, a lot of people call it tapping. And the modality was developed in the 80s by Gary Craig. And he had been studying with a psychologist by the name of Roger Callahan, who had developed a methodology called thought field therapy. And what he found was by using exposure therapy, which exposure therapy is basically like, you know, throw you into the deep end of the pool if you're afraid of water. But by using exposure therapy in a way where you're just talking about your emotional triggers, he found that if while you talked about those emotional triggers, you tapped on different meridian points on your body, that he was getting really good results with helping people overcome phobias and anxieties and such. So Gary Craig was a student of his, and he took that methodology and simplified it into, and he called it emotional freedom technique, and it's the technique that EFT is today. A lot of us like to call it a form of emotional acupuncture because it's like acupuncture, except you're not using the needles, and you can do it anywhere because you're just tapping on different points on your body. And the biggest thing you should know about it is that it's just a way to calm the brain. It's a way to calm the amygdala. It's a way to send a calming signal to your body when you're in the middle of stress to help calm you down. There is a ton of uses for it. And here are some of them. I mean, it basically can be used on just about anything. I always like to say, when in doubt, just tap it out. If you're not sure, just tap on it and see what happens. It can't hurt to tap on it. Some of the uses are phobias. It's great for phobias, especially if you have a phobia that stems from something that happened, like let's say in your childhood. You got bit by a dog maybe. And to this day, dogs really scare you. By tapping on that memory way back when you were first bit by that dog, and tapping on all the different parts of what happened, you can actually bring that phobia down to almost a level of 0 where you really don't have that phobia anymore. It also is great for PTSD. There's something called Battle Tap. It's a group that works with veterans. And that's when I was in training. I had talked to a psychologist where her and her husband were psychologists at Fort Hood working with veterans that had PTSD. And I spoke to her about it, and she said that they had been using it for a number of years, almost since it was first developed, and that they found that it was very successful. And there's been a lot of research done on PTSD, and it is found to be very successful with veterans with PTSD. It's also then, of course, great for anxiety, anger management. Here's something that a lot of people don't think about is one of the uses for EFT is food and cigarette cravings. So if you have a food craving, or if you're still a smoker, EFT can really help to bring those cravings down. There's actually been a number of books written around EFT for weight loss, especially when it comes to emotional eating. They find it very helpful. And finally, stress and overwhelm. And a big one is procrastination. You know, if you're having trouble just sitting down and doing something, many times all procrastination is just fear of perfection, you know, fear of not being good enough, fear of not doing it right, fear of not making it perfect enough. So EFT is a great tool for procrastination. And, you know, the one thing we always like to add is that, you know, yeah, there's a ton of uses for it, but it's not a panacea. I mean, you have to use it, and it won't help with everything. But let's say you have pain. There's another thing that I hadn't put on here is pain management. Let's say that you have a lot of pain. A lot of times what they've discovered is that there's an emotional component to pain. So if you tap on the pain and the emotion around that pain, you can bring that pain down somewhat. So the way I look at it is, like, let's say you have a lot of anxiety, or you have pain, or you have even anger issues. If you can get that to be manageable to a point where maybe you can bring that level down by 25%, or even 50%, think about how life-changing that would be. I mean, that would be completely life-changing, especially if you're in pain or you have terrible anxiety. So even though emotional freedom technique seems a bit odd at first, I always say give it a try to see if it works for you. And so here, why use it? Why bother? Charlie and I always like to say on the radio show, why bother? Why should I do this? Well, it's easy to learn. And it's effective, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can try it yourself. Actually, I find the best results are with the people that don't really believe that it works. Those are the ones that all of a sudden have a bad night, something happens, they say, I'm in so much pain or so much distress, I'm just going to go ahead and tap what the hell. And they can always come back to me and they say, you know what, it actually worked, I really got relief. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can just try it yourself and see if it works. And the other thing is it can work pretty quickly too. If you're tapping on the right issue and the right aspect of that issue, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it can work really quickly. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about clinical EFT because that's who I was trained with, the group that uses clinical EFT, because a lot of research has been done around EFT with this group. So if you're one that really likes science, if you want to know the clinicals behind this modality, then you can go to EFTuniverse.com and you can see the research there and read up on it yourself. I personally I like to see the clinicals, but I also like to use it and see if it's effective for me. Some of the other resources are the tapping solution, and then Gary Craig has EMO-Free, EMOFREE. So let's dive into the basics. The thing with EFT, what we do with EFT is we really focus on the negative feelings in order to release them. So what I find a lot of times is people will say to me, well, I don't like to use EFT because I don't really like to focus on the negative. I'm a very positive person. I want to focus on the positive. I want to work on my positive affirmations. I get that. I agree with you. But what EFT does is that it helps you with those positive affirmations, because we're not focusing on the negative to stew in the negative. We're focusing on the negative in order to release the negative. To release the negative. And that's the part that I really love about EFT, is it really helps to release all those negative sensations that you have in your body. And that's really where the magic happens. Because a lot of times what you'll find is people will say they want to focus on the positive pieces and they want to tap in the positive. That's not where the work happens. We will talk about positive rounds, but the work really comes in is when you talk about the negative and you trigger those emotions, and then you tap on those emotions in order to release it. And I like to talk about the tabletop and the legs, because when you're using EFT, one of the things that you want to do is get very, very specific. So if you look at a tabletop issue would be anxiety. And the legs of the tabletop that hold up that tabletop are all the different little bits and pieces of evidence that you have that has created this anxiety in you. So maybe it was you were bullied as a kid, and in third grade they humiliated you in front of the class. That would be considered a leg. And then later on, you had a bad divorce, and that would be considered another leg. And you just have all these different issues that are all these legs of this table that kind of shore up this feeling of anxiety. What you do is you start working on kind of knocking down each one of those legs so that that tabletop can then tumble, because it doesn't have anything to stand on anymore, if that makes sense. So think about that for a second. What you want to do with EFT is be very, very specific. You want to work on the legs and not the tabletop. You can tap on anxiety, all this anxiety, I have all this anxiety. You can do that, but it's not going to be as effective as getting down to the nitty-gritty and getting down to the legs. I also wanted to talk about something that we call a SUDS level. It's a subjective units of distress. And all it really is taking a level as to where you're at in the emotion. So it's on a scale of 0 to 10. 10 being that your emotion is off the charts, and 0 being that you have really no emotion around it, and 5 is kind of neutral. So let's say if we go back to the example of doing a presentation. If it were me 10 years ago, someone asked me to do a presentation, I would be off the charts at a 10. Or let's say you have another issue, someone's bringing up the holidays, you've lost someone you care about deeply, that you'll start crying, that's a 10. A 0 means that you're really okay with whatever this memory or this feeling is. You don't really need to work on that. The ones you want to work on the ones that are like a 5 and above. And what you use it for is to determine your level of progress, because sometimes EFT can work so quickly that it brings down your distress really fast, and you don't really realize that you've made a lot of progress. So if you take a SUDS level before you start tapping, and then you look at that SUDS level after you tap, you can really see that you've made some progress. So that's why we use the SUDS level. And I also I make it even simpler by using my fear scale, which is still 0 to 10. 10 again is off the charts. 0, there's no buzz on that issue at all. So let's take a look at the tapping points. And there's 9 tapping points in all. And I know that you can see me up in the corner of your screen. So I'm going to take my glasses off and go through the tapping points. And this diagram and the tapping points are also in your handout that was in that download. So we start with what we call the karate chop point. And that's just this fleshy part on the side of your hand. And all you're going to do is tap lightly. Tapping hard does not make tapping more effective at all. So there's no need to tap yourself black and blue. We're just tapping very, very lightly and about 5 to 7 times. You don't even have to really count. If you're saying the reminder phrases, which we'll talk about in a sec, you'll see that it just comes naturally. So this is what we call the karate chop point, and this is where we use what we call a setup statement, and I'll explain that in a second. So this is the karate chop point. Then we go to the eyebrow. And here I just like to use 2 fingers, and it's just at the ends of your eyebrows. And I actually tap on both of my eyebrows. And please tap along with me so that you get the feel of it. Then there's the side of the eye. It's just on the orbital bone. Under the eye. Under the nose. On the chin, and that little crease in your chin. And this is called the sore spot or the collarbone spot. It's actually like about 2 inches down from your collarbone. It's a little fleshy spot right here. We call it the collarbone. And then under the arm is where your bra strap is. You can also go across your body too, either one. This is really the goofiest one. And then the last one is the top of the head. So let me do these again really quick and just tap along with me. So you've got the karate chop point, the eyebrow point, side of the eye, under the eye, under the nose, on your chin, the collarbone, under the arm, and the top of your head. Okay, that's all there is to it. Now, keep an open mind about it, because I know that it's very different. If you've never used tapping before, I know that it's different, but just try it for yourself to see if it works for you. Now, the next thing, now that you know the tapping points, let's go into what we call the basic recipe. And this is really just how to set up a tapping session. So the first is you determine the problem. And I like to, when I use the problem, I like to be very, very specific. It's what we talked about before about the tabletop and the legs, right? You want to get very specific about what the issue is. So let's go back to the phobia about the dog, right? You want to go back to that memory about the dog, even though I have this fear of dogs. I have this fear of dogs. I'm scared to death of dogs, right? So when you think about that, give it a SUDS level. How badly are you scared of dogs? Is it a 10? Is it a 9? Is it an 8? Give it a level. I mean, guess. If you don't know for sure, just give it a guess. Is it on the higher side or on the lower side? And just write that down. Then from there, we create a setup statement. And that's what we used on the karate chop point. And I'll go through this, so don't worry. But the setup statement is it states the problem followed by an affirmation. So you're stating the problem. Say, even though I have this fear of dogs or I have this anxiety around speaking, I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay, that's all it is. And this is, you just repeat it 3 times when you do the setup. The next is the reminder phrases. And what the reminder phrases do is they trigger the emotion. So people get very hung up on the reminder phrases that they don't know exactly what to say. It's not so much around what you say, it's around what you feel. Because remember, when we're using emotional freedom technique, we're trying to bring down the feelings. We're doing it to release feelings that are overwhelming us. And we're trying to calm down our system. So that's what those reminder phrases are for. So I will show you a couple reminder phrases on the next page. And then you just tap on all the points until your SUDS level comes down to below a 4. And we'll do that. I'll have an example of that. So here's an example. And I wanted to give a little disclaimer before we start. You know, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychoanalyst. If you have some trauma, some deep trauma, it's always important to work with someone that is well-versed in whatever it is that you're suffering with. So this is a tool that you can use on your own, but if there's something that you're really struggling with, it's always best to go to someone that is well-versed and a professional in that field. The other thing I wanted to bring up is if for some reason you have to testify in a court of law and you have to have your memory intact around something painful, it's best not to tap on that until after you've testified, because what EFT does is it sort of neutralizes that emotion and that memory. And so it may be hard for you to remember that. So I just wanted to say that before we start. So in this example, as you can see, this might be one that might be a little bit close to me, closer to home to me. And the issue is I've been asked to give a webinar and I'm terrified. And on this, we can do a SUDS level. Let's say the SUDS level is a 10, right? So we have the problem. I've been asked to give a webinar and I'm terrified to do it. The SUDS level is off the charts, it's a 10. From here, I create a setup statement. Even though I'm scared to give this webinar, I deeply and completely accept myself. Very simple, you don't have to get overly wordy. I know sometimes you'll see people that put a lot of verbiage behind it. You can, and that's great, but you don't have to. It can be very, very simple. From there, you go into the reminder phrases. And in this instance, I used everyone is going to judge me. I feel vulnerable. I'll turn red. My hands will shake. I'm so scared. I hate being on camera. And anything else that you come up with. So let's go ahead and try it. So what I would like you to do right now is just take a minute and get ready. And let's go ahead and tap together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap first. I'm going to say the phrase, and then you tap along with me and you say it right behind me. And I'll pause to give you some time to go ahead and say it. All right? Now, there's something called borrowed benefits. And what borrowed benefits is that I could be tapping on an issue for myself, and if you're tapping along with me, you will get some benefits from that tapping as well. So you may have some stress from the day, and what you may find is as you tap along with me, that stress will start coming down. Okay, so let me take a sip of water and then we'll start. So let's start with the karate chop point and the setup statement. And I'm going to leave my glasses on so that I can read. Even though I'm scared to give this webinar, I deeply and completely accept myself. And again, even though I'm scared to give this webinar, I deeply and completely accept myself. And one more time, even though I'm scared to give this webinar, I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay, then we'll start. And just repeat after me. Everyone is going to judge me. Side of the eye, I feel vulnerable. Under the eye, I'll turn red. Under the nose, my hands will shake. On the chin, I'm so scared. Collarbone, I hate being on camera. And underarm, I want to run away. And then top of the head, I don't want to do this. And let's do it again. Eyebrow, everyone is going to judge me. Side of the eye, I feel vulnerable. Under the eye, I'll turn red. Under the nose, my hands will shake. Chin, I am so scared. Collarbone, I hate being on camera. Underarm, I want to run away. And top of the head, I don't want to do this. So now just take a deep breath. And if this was a problem for you, test your SUDS level. So if your SUDS level stayed the same, then just keep tapping and maybe add some different reminder phrases. But if it's lower, if it's still 5 and above, keep tapping. But what you can do is you can just do a simple, I'm just scared, I'm just scared, I'm still scared, this remaining fear, I have this remaining fear, I have this remaining fear. You just tap like that, see if it brings it down. If you're a 0 to a 1, then you're done. It's perfect, it's done. Now, sometimes what will happen is your level will be higher. That's happened a few times. I've actually had that happen in my Stand Up and Be Heard class. People's anxiety went up. If that should happen, that means you're being triggered by another aspect, by another leg of that table. So take a look at what it is that's triggering you. But the thing to remember is to keep tapping. Don't stop tapping. If it goes higher, keep tapping. And typically, you'll feel that in your body somewhere. So if you get a knot in the pit of your stomach and you can't really put the words around it, just say, this knot in the pit of my stomach, this knot in the pit of my stomach. And tap that way. This knot in the pit of my stomach, this knot in the pit of my stomach, this knot in the pit of my stomach, until it comes down. And that's important to remember. Always, if it goes higher, keep tapping. And again, I want to reiterate, it's feelings, right? It's all about the feelings. It's about releasing the negative feelings and the memories because they no longer serve you. So it's great for us to feel our feelings. It's so important. But if those feelings become overwhelming, tapping is a great tool to use to bring that negativity down and to release those negative feelings so that you then can use your positive affirmations. So now's the time when you're down to a 0. Now is the time to add a positive round. So with a positive round, we're just saying some good things, right? So in this case, we'll do a fast positive round. You can just follow me. Eyebrow. I can do this. I know what I'm talking about. This will be fun. I need to share this information. So even though I'm a bit nervous, I can do this and do it well. I'm looking forward to it. all is well. That's a nice positive round and a nice way to end out your EFT session. So again, the basic recipe is determine the problem, give it a SUDS level, create a setup statement, which you use 3 times, create the reminder phrases, which you then tap on, and then tap on the tapping points until your SUDS goes down to below a 4. You want to get it to 0, but if you can't, a 4 is always good too. And just, I know that we're at the half hour, just a couple additional things. Remember, the words are not important. It's the feelings that are. The words just bring the feelings up. They're just used as emotional triggers. So don't get hung up on the words. If you're just scared, say, I'm scared. The other thing is you have to tap. So if you're having an issue, just remember to tap. You can't just talk about it. You have to tap and talk on it. And if you've uncovered any trauma, make sure that you keep tapping and then go seek professional help. So I know we're a little bit over, but I'm just wondering, does anyone have a question? Here, let me take a look. The question is, do you recommend keeping a tapping log? Actually, I do. There is something called the personal peace procedure, which is you write down like 100 incidents of something that has happened to you, and then you tap on those. You tap on 1 or 2 a day until you get through those, and of course, you will come up with more. But yeah, I do keep a tapping log to see the issues that I've tapped on. But I think what you'll find is when you start using it, and you start using it on issues that really cause you a lot of grief or distress, that you'll find that it really does bring those emotions down. So any other questions? Well, thanks so much, everyone. I know that we've gone a little bit over. Like I said, I will send out the replay tomorrow. If you have any questions at all, if there's anything that you'd like to see another webinar on, if there's anything that you'd like to know more about, please reach out to me at eva@charlieandeva.com. Otherwise, have a great night. Thanks again for joining.